But thank you for joining us for OT Office Hours. So this is our monthly series where we share some OT knowledge with you that hopefully will help you in your day-to-day OT practice. So today, I'm joined by Dan Gunner, the CEO and founder of Insane Forensics, and Chris Bahari, the co-founder and CEO of Garland Technology. I'm Sam Becker. I'm the director of marketing at Insane Cyber. So at Insane Cyber, we're focused on combining host and network data analysis for a full picture of cybersecurity to detect, secure, and maintain resilience among an evolving threat landscape. And today, like I said, we're joined by our partner Garland. And Garland Technology is an industry leader of OT and IT network solutions for enterprise, critical infrastructure, and government agencies worldwide. Since 2011, Garland Technology has been engineering and manufacturing simple, reliable, and affordable network taps and network packet brokers in Richardson, Texas. For help identifying the right IT OT network visibility solutions for projects large and small, or to learn more about the inventor of the first bypass technology, visit garlandtechnology.com. So today we're going to be diving into all things flyaway kits and network taps. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit them to us um, through the Q&A function, and we will answer those towards the end of the presentation here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Chris to get started. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Awesome. Chris, you can go first.
Excellent. Sam and Dan, appreciate you having me join today. As Sam said, I'm Chris Bahari. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Garland Technology, and excited to talk about flyaway kits and how they work in industrial networks and how we're seeing a lot of growth here. And so, Dan, again, great to see you. I know we just saw each other at S4 in Tampa. So I'm back in Buffalo, New York. So it's a little colder here, but great to be on today and look forward to this session.
Likewise, and I'm Dan Gunner, CEO and founder, as Sam mentioned, of Insane Cyber. Been in this space on the commercial side with other passive network monitoring companies, and before that was actually active duty Air Force. And so, for this topic of flyaway kits, what's interesting is, bringing experience both from the commercial side, from experience out there, as well as what flyaway kits looked at in a past life. I actually started my career with the Air Force CERT, and so right out of the gates, I was kind of responsible, or part of the team responsible for enterprise network security. So flyway kits are becoming a really interesting and popular area, both on the federal side and a little more on the commercial and OT and other space. So yeah, excited to be here. Also, I'm in San Antonio, and so Chris, like it's been cold here.
Right.
That's a whole different cold than, up in New York. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Next slide, Sam. So we'll start with what a flyaway kit is. Flyaway kits have evolved over the years. And so back in the days, we had flyaway kits that were everything from a, half rack you would roll onto a plane that you could get in parts of the world to monitor, down to now flyaway kits are really pushing down so you can get them to hard parts of the field to go out there. So starting with what are the components of a flyway kit, there's really the hardware, the software, and accessories side. And what this looks like and when you actually take it in the field can again depend on things like, hey, what weight can I deal with? Am I going out to an environment where this needs to be rated for, shock and heat and everything going out there? Am I having to throw this on a helicopter? There's kind of the environmental aspect of it that's challenging. And then there's also the aspect of line speed. So if you're like, hey, I'm just worried about 1 gig per second or 10 gig per second, the solution looks a bit different than, if you're like, hey, I'm worried about, 20 or 40 gigs a second or more. So when we look at typical hardware on a flyway kit, you certainly have the laptops. it's possible to take certain parts of the analysis side virtual. But then you get into things like network taps, things like and packet brokers, things like Garland Technology provides. And Chris, I'll turn over to you for some of your perspective, both on, how you see kind of those fit the field and where you see customers getting excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, right, you started using them when you were serving. And so for us at Garland Technology, we really started getting involved in flyaway kits for military applications as well. So for different DoD departments. So I would say maybe I don't know, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago that we really started getting engaged with being asked to provide some smaller footprint hardware, lighter weight, lower power consumption, and to assist in right capturing data for monitoring purposes in the field for different applications, which we can obviously talk about the application side a little later in the presentation. But for us, we really look at it as an infrastructure play. And when you're taking a flyaway kit, right, it's important that you're prepared. And so if you're looking at doing some packet capture, utilizing IDS, utilizing some software, uh, you don't always know what you're going to run into the field. So this is where we found that our network tap technology is a great kind of number one place, right, to get started. And it's something that if you're not familiar with the network tap, just for the audience, one of the things that a network tap can do is be inserted between two network devices. So this could be copper or fiber. And, let's just say, Dan's the router and I'm the switch, right? We place the wire tap in between Dan and I, and the tap's job is to make sure you copy the entire conversation. So you would, copy everything I say and everything Dan says. So a couple, unique things about network taps that are important. One is there's no IP, no MAC, right? So it's not, detectable on the network, and its whole mission in life is just to copy the packet, so you guarantee it. So again, it's a great, piece of gear to have to make sure that you get that foundational piece that you can guarantee that you're getting the traffic. And with these types of kits, we always utilize our unidirectional data diode design network taps as well. So what that means is if you were to insert a tap between two devices, it's going to copy every packet, but there's no way to go in the reverse direction. So you're never going to inject data back to the live network that you need to monitor or support. So we'll go again to more applications, but network taps is important. Another area is packet brokers. So if you worked with packet brokers, right, traditionally, 1U, very large, deep, right? Usually you're seeing 48, 52 plus ports in a packet broker. And when we started really getting involved in the flyaway kits, we started doing designs of our hardware to accommodate this. So smaller footprint, lighter weight, allowing you to achieve the small footprint so you can put it in a small TSA compliant case. And so that's one of the things that we've look at now with our product development. So we are proud, we're a US company, and originally our engineering manufacturing was done in Garland, Texas. That's where the name came from. But we look at we always look at different products when we're coming out with new taps, new packet brokers. Can we put them in a smaller footprint? Can we make it lighter weight? So we're always thinking about the applications with the hardware on the flyaway kits. So, we like to say it starts with the packets, and then from there, Dan, it can start moving into your software piece and collections from the sensors.
Yeah, and absolutely. And kind of going off another scenario off of what Chris was saying, what's interesting there too is, whether you're doing threat hunting or whether like certain law enforcement activities or even HR activities, the decision to use like a span versus a tap port. If you span, you put traffic on the backplane of the switch. We've been out to industrial networks where our first question always when they're like, let me go ahead and span is, hey, do you know what the load is on the actual network infrastructure there? So, when you go into the OT space, they're in industrial and critical space, there are very real questions to where sometimes, the physics of the tap is superior to, overloading already overloaded, kind of backplane on a router switch.
Y-
Other
Yeah.
side of that too is
Yep.
like we've worked HR cases, we've worked other cases to where if you if you make certain configuration changes, it might tip off the insider, whoever you're actually investigating. And so we've even had HR cases, even before you touch, some law enforcement sensitivity uses on, when you're through a tap, there can even be, less visibility to a sophisticated attacker who's actually on the network that you're there. From the software perspective too, again, we do a lot with threat hunting, flyway kits, and IR. The other focus on there too is, when we're connecting and when we want it to be passive, oftentimes when we're connecting flyway kits, we're still using taps even if they span it right, because oftentimes when we show up on sites, the accuracy of the span port actually being set up properly, is another fun below 50% type deal. So software wise on these kits, and we can then move to key features. It comes down to, hey, are we doing intrusion detection? Are we analyzing traffic? What host and network data are we getting into and where's it at? Key features on these, Chris hit it pretty well too. Portability has stepped up significantly. Well, we're in the age to where a lot of flyway kits, there's a lot on the market that are building them, 1 to 3U size. We actually, for ours, our form factor now is down to about 3.5 pounds, about 8 pounds total with the case and everything. And a lot of that goes back to the side of oftentimes you need data that's out in austere remote environments, often without internet. And so the ability to go out and collect data, and that portability is key. Same with the scalability. So we've had cases, threat hunting, we've had cases, incident response wise, to where, we weren't able to push data back over a VPN or push it up into the cloud for analysis, right? Maybe the sensitivity of that data kept it, or, you're at a renewable site that's either just off the cell grid or not. Scalability to actually handle that data in the field and not have to go back and forth, particularly if the dynamics of your operation mean you can't get out there often, or it's expensive, or there's risk associated. Sometimes you only have, certain windows of opportunity to actually get the data. Connectivity wise, obviously, supporting wired, wireless networks. Some of this can depend on what you're looking on. Security, same deal. That's a key part out there. And then rapid deployment. This is an area we're pushing big. With building these flyway kits out, a question we often get as well, can I build this myself? Can I use open source? Absolutely. Like at some level, you could build anything yourself, but having a ready to use option that can quickly be pushed out is key. I'll stop for a minute and go over to you, Chris. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it is amazing just some of the changes over the last couple of years and the focus right in this space. So things have been definitely the size of the products we've been you know always looking at ways to minimize and wait, and even some field taps we have now that you can interconnect to a USB port on your data collection unit or your laptop, right? And be able to power it up and be able to do that, packet capture, over your USB 3.0 connection, and looking at ways to ensure that we're going to have that availability of the network. So the span versus tap conversation you're talking a little about previously is an important one, right? Because you want to make sure that you have the ability to get the packets. And, with OT, another risk factor, right? A lot of times we find that, a lot of the switches are unmanaged as well. So when you start looking at, critical infrastructure, you do run into some older technology and a little more risk there if you go out to a remote site, with an assumption that maybe you can configure a spam port, it's not there. So, right, I think a lot of it's with these kits is being prepared, being ready, having some devices that allow you to get access to that packet level data, so you're not going to go on a trip and not be able to accomplish what you're out to do on your mission. And so all these little things I think are important to be thinking about. And in OT as well, critical infrastructure, there may be parts of the network that are managed by third parties. So that's another area that can cause you a challenge when you're looking at what should you be putting in your kits to make sure that you have the ability to you know capture the traffic that you need when you're on site. But no, it's an exciting industry. I still think it's in an infancy stage. And so I think when people really start thinking about how they can take their passive monitoring solutions from the data center remotely, uh, I think we'll find, from sessions like this that, more use cases, people will think about how it can be used to, make their life a little easier, get their jobs done more effectively, and, take that compute, on the road with them.
Awesome. Showing a quick photo of what a solution looks like, and specifically the solution that Garland and Saint Cyber kind of has together. This is the base, like I was saying, to the 8-pound side. So to show those components we were talking about earlier, we have the Garland, this is the P1G CCAS. We have the Signet platform, which is just an on-logic box with Insane Cyber's software on it. So we're actually a software company we can install on basically any in-deployable format, even down to a Raspberry Pi, and still be functional for these. Like what we like to that sizing and ability is the platform in here, we have up to 10 terabytes, up to 64 gigs of RAM. So to that field size, to getting something out into the field, this whole package is just around 8 pounds. This is good for, again, about up to that gig per second, just limitations on the on-logic box, but to the point of having both kind of built out solutions and then expanding up. This is what kind of the small 8-pound form factor looks like. Chris, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's where, things are really changing a lot, right? So the more small, compact, on the go, I look at it as, almost any, network or security engineer could use this as their toolkit, right? So they can be more effective with their job and be able to, gain access to the network, troubleshoot, and because there's still requirements, right, where people are doing half racks, full racks, putting them on a plane, and but more often, right, people are trying to make it where they can hop on a commercial flight and either what's nice about this, right, you don't even need to worry about it fitting the overhead, right? You could pop this thing in your laptop bag or put it right underneath your seat in front of you, just as long as you're not in row one. And so it really changes the game here and makes it again, use cases we'll be running through, but it really gives you a lot of abilities to do, performance monitoring, to security monitoring, assessments, and threat detection. So it's a great way to get started with a flyaway kit.
TSA, it's funny, I always get the question on these kits out of San Antonio. They're like, okay, what is it? An industrial computer. I only get asked on San Antonio out of these. But funny enough, like to that form factor size, and actually where we kind of came from there was, you know, oftentimes on this, the hosted network data side, what we were having to do, or we would see something passive network, and then we would use this form factor to kick in and analyze Windows event logs, analyze other data. one refinery I was at that didn't have good internet access. One night we got 60 gigs of Windows domain controller logs to go through at the hotel that night. Didn't really have options or abilities to push it up. And so to that story, like having that kit, was a huge win to kind of do a hotel room analysis. So hopping into the use case of IR and forensics, to that point of what we just said, what's interesting is cases like refineries. We have substation projects where they're like, hey, we have, the east or west out between the control systems and the substation rings monitored, but we don't have a lot of visibility lower down. Having flyway kits that you can proactively on a threat hunt approach put out, or reactively for incident response to be like, hey, is something happening via DNP3, via 61850, via one of the industrial protocols or other technologies out there. We have different customers that have kind of expressed that need on like, hey, let's push this out to cover blind spots we know are out there that either don't justify the full, investment of an in-place passive monitoring, but that can be hit by, passive tool. Battery sites have been popular really lately, just because some of those supply chain risks and some of the national conversations around those. So we've done a fair bit of battery site analysis work also lately. What this does in incident response, that ability to send it out quickly on our kits, why we also optimize to wait is when you have a contract with UPS or FedEx and you can get it out very quickly, right? You can get it out, without breaking the bank on the shipping costs, right? What the kit should do is enable then that on-site data collection. So if you do need to put it at a different part of the Purdue stack to get data, that's where having like that modular combination of tap and analysis box is key, right? Because in that case, you're generally triaging incidents and working through different parts of that. Same deal, host data. And then as you go into supercritical sites, last thing I'll say, and then turn it over to Chris. The last thing I'll say is oftentimes we've even gone into places to where, you bring the kit in and the hard drives don't leave because of the sensitivity of the place. And so, the good thing is if you're working again on sensitive things to where you can't keep your hard drives at the end, the worst case you do is just give them the memory and hard drives and rebuy and rebuild the kit. So, Chris, any other
Yeah.
thoughts or things you're seeing on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think, especially in the OT space, right, we're seeing uh, there's not generally a lot of visibility beyond north-south for a lot of companies, right? So, the application to be able to, ship the kit out. And I think, another important piece is the ease of use, right, Dan? So maybe you can even just make a comment on this, 'cause I think it's so important, is that, the fact that, if you ship this out, you can walk someone through, right, how to, plug in the tap and plug in your device to start doing that. So you don't always have to have an expert at that other end, which I think is a critical piece. So maybe you have an example recently where you did that.
Oh, absolutely. So that's some of the fun of these too
Yep.
is we have customers where it's different MSSPs at different sites or even different ops teams and the ability to take an incident response team that might be, only a half dozen or less of people and multiply them across a lot of sites. That's where like having kind of a commercial solution can be helpful. Because like we have it down on some of the instructions on, plug in the network cable, plug in the power, don't do anything else. People will still screw up those two instructions, but you have a better chance without having to go boots on ground everywhere, right? Because
Yeah.
one of the current downsides of where we're at with things being so heavy, professional services is just, the requirements for boots to be on the ground beyond.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, it's one of those things I think where, also looking at proactive side of it, right? So, what do you have in the field? So we're starting to see this as well, where, people are utilizing this, just not knowing after there's been an incident, but, starting, collect baseline information, right? And other things like that. So, the kits, again, empower your teams to, expand their touch, move fast, get the data that you need, if there is an incident, and be able to do it in a way that is easy and simple. And so I think that's one of the things that you know we're finding with the growth side of it is that we're enabling them right with this easy kit, easy to use. Don't have to be the expert at the other end, right? We need someone who can be there locally to plug things in, but then we can get the data and start analyzing it and understanding what's occurring.
Awesome. For assessments, this has been another interesting area. So we've seen a lot of different consulting groups and others we're working with that see value in this doing assessments, right? Some do assessments only when a plant's turning around or when a site's in a maintenance window. Others come in at different points, right? And so, flyweight kits don't just have to be flying away for incident response. It also can help with, some of that baselining, understanding what's going out there, checking site walk downs and actually checking things are going on. A fun area I've been brought in is due diligence when plants are being bought, or when someone's about to buy a plant. We'll actually see engagements around, hey, go tell us where the skeletons are in this closet, either on the buying side or selling side. And so we've been involved in both, kind of all around on there. And, even when you get into, red team assessments and other areas, you can also drop in there. So that visibility on the host and network side, and to Chris's point on getting data from other parts of the Purdue model that you might not already have covered. A portable solution like a flyweight kit is a pretty cost-effective way to bring a lot of that traffic in. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, it's things I'm seeing too is right, a lot of manufacturing, utilities, maritime, all different types of industries are obviously taking initiatives, right, to move forward with their security deployments. But a lot of times it's not mapped out as clean as IT, right? Where you say, okay, I have my 4 data centers, I got everything documented perfectly, and I know what I need. I can do a quick deployment. We're seeing that a lot of security deployments in a lot of these environments take time, require people to do site surveys, assessments. So part of this is allowing you to expedite some of your passive monitoring solutions, and not waiting for full deployment. So, as you mentioned in here, right, baselining and understanding what you have, understanding where there's risk. Let's not wait. Let's make sure that we're being proactive during this process. And you may find that if you're doing if you're looking at doing 150 plants, that may end up being 2-year deployment, but it doesn't mean that you can't start assessing the sites that you haven't been able to deploy yet and start understanding certain risk areas. And so that's I think a great way to get a handle on all your different sites faster, and not waiting until right, you get all your deployments done over the next 2+ years. And so I think that's a gap that people are finding the flyaway kits being really useful. And then obviously if there is an issue, that they're ready to ship them out to a particular site. So this is definitely a great use case, and really is allowing customers to understand what they have in all their different environments.
Awesome. Network monitoring and threat hunting. This is, again, both on that proactive side, but this is where a lot of people kind of think of the kits. If it's not the reactive IR, it's oftentimes the proactive network monitoring and threat hunting side. We get asked all the time, we're like, hey, like our flyweight kits, a direct competitor to the passive network monitoring solutions. And there's certainly feature overlap with kind of the long-standing passive network monitoring, but Flyway kits also play in a space to where some of those larger enterprise solutions, either because of cost or ability to deploy out and manage them out in a network, sometimes you need a more tactical option to reach parts that maybe that other investment can't hit. And so, what's interesting from the network monitoring space with a lot of folks we've worked with is that's one of our first questions we'll ask. We're like, okay, what are you doing for host monitoring? What are you doing for network monitoring? And figuring out then and being like, hey, well, what's the actual coverage? Where are the blind spots in your network? Where are you actually worried about either, a problem happening or, you know, suspecting there's a threat in there? So that ability to pivot around, that ability to get to both real time, we can do both batch and streaming hosted network data analysis. The ability to handle both can get a lot of data that might not already be in your tech stack. And this goes back again when you go on the host data side too. One of the big challenges is you might want things like Sysmon and other data from an endpoint, Windows event logs, other things. In some environments, you may be able to put it up into a SIM like Splunk. In other environments, you may actually need a Flyway kit to reach down to either a super remote site or a site where it either wouldn't be safe or viable to send data back. So kind of that tactical level of network monitoring and threat hunting is key. And this is where we honestly see a lot of excitement in the space on, again, reaching parts of the network that are either blind. No one wants them to be blind. Everyone has a budget though, and you can only afford to put as much fixed security places. So, Chris, over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's it's just a great point. And there's areas that you know it's just not feasible to be monitoring everything. Long term, right? Your strategy is to continue to expand and uh, see more of your network for your permanent installation. But um, you know, depending on the environments and uh, the type of industries, and especially in industrial industries, you're finding unique areas that it's just difficult and costly to get that level of data. So it's just getting people prepared to be able to be able to do this on a effective manner. And again, I think it's a lot of this is awareness right now, right? Just making customers aware that you have the ability to accomplish this in a way that you don't have to wait to say, hey, I have a strategy to build out coverage over the next 5 years. So now let's be tactical about it. Let's go after areas that we're concerned about that are critical, but we know we don't have the infrastructure to do permanent passive monitoring 24/7, 365. So I think this just opens up the doors for customers to be a lot more proactive in these areas and really understand it. And 'cause again, a lot of customers just aren't monitoring a lot of areas, and especially when you start getting down to the asset layer, right? For a lot of critical infrastructure. So it's a great thing to enable our customers to have this ability, and we're really seeing people move on this and see the value.
And oftentimes too, you need a deeper view on like we'll have people use open source tools on certain parts of the network. And for Schneider Electric PLC specifically, they'll be like, hey, I'm using open source. I see, Modbus function code 90, which leads you to Schneider's protocol. And then they're kind of like, we don't know what's going on down at this level. We've had a few cases where then because we do have UMass dissected, that's one of the proprietary protocols we do cover. Again, that tactical ability is key because sometimes you may just be able to see Modbus, you may be able to see Modbus down to function code 90. But if you want to see did I see actually a UMass program upload, an upload to a Schneider PLC, sometimes you do need tactical monitoring. If the architecture of your current strategy or just the ability to get the data where it needs to can't get there. So next slide. Red team and pin testing. This is one a lot don't think about, but is kind of interesting. So flyweight kits also super useful. We've done projects to where we actually deployed flyweight kits ahead of a pin test to simulate sophisticated attacker that had sat there and basically done research into the environment. In that case, it actually was both OT and IT pin test. And so in that case, like we were setting up to understand the environment the way an attacker would. Um, these flyweight kits can be super helpful for identifying vulnerabilities, identifying opportunities for, future red team engagements. The other thing specific to our flyweight kits we ask for, you have to opt into this. This isn't enabled by default. Someone asked, can we actually do active probing to send a single 61850 or send that single Modbus packet for identification? In some cases, we actually have added that capability for the flyweight kit to send the or Ethernet IP broadcast to say, hey, PLCs, tell me your make, model, and version out there. So red teaming, pen testing, another not thought about part of this. Where it's key for OT is you could safely do that analysis in the production side off of a tap, off of a packet broker, so you're not on the network, and then emulate what you need to in the lab. So this isn't necessarily saying you're red teaming on the production network. This is saying you're doing a lot of the analysis in a safe way to, really test to see what the risks are for a given environment. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, there was a little chat too and a question regarding maybe some questions if you're looking at a tap. And so I guess really quickly just addressing that, if you're not familiar with network taps, one easy way to think about it is match the media type and the speed. So, if it's, older technology, like 100 base FX, that would be multi-mode fiber. And with 100 base FX, we do have actually a pretty unique tap that we can do media conversion, because there's not a NIC card that you can buy for any PC out there to do data collection. So we can do media conversion and stuff like that. So yeah, when you're looking at network tapping, one of the things that simple things to think about is always match media type and speed to ensure that it's going to work. And that's where sometimes having copper fiber taps available. We can also do different types of media conversion, and so it's definitely important to make sure that you're speccing out the right tap. And one of the things, active versus passive, traditionally in these types of environments, we're doing everything out of band. So it's important that you also have a data diode design tap. So if a tap gets inserted between two devices and we copy that traffic, there's no way to go in the reverse direction. So we're always making sure that we're doing isolation, and we're making sure that we're never introducing a backdoor to the network. And so with all the kits, we want to make sure that we're guaranteeing network uptime and not introducing any points that you can get access to the live network, right? We just want to copy it over. So yeah, I mean, it's, as you mentioned on the red teaming, pen testing, again, I always like to say the truth is in the packets. So, when we, are doing deployments, it's always good that, if you're doing some type of testing validation, that, you can do that independently with a wiretap.
Another good point brought up was sometimes you can't tap because, yes, if the tap's not already in place, you do have to, disconnect temporarily to connect it in. So a fair point is sometimes, a span or mirror is all you have to a tap. This is another to where, again, that's where it's kind of important to think ahead. If you have, if you have the ability to get it in the right spots where you're concerned on it, and you can do it in like a turnaround or do it in a maintenance window, do that. To the point brought up 100%. Connecting one, you do have to often disconnect the others. What we'll also do in that case, though, is even if we're again off a span or off of a mirror, still use the tap just so we have some layer of protection against the other side. Yep. So, last thing on that I'll say is that we do have actually a few clients too, to where like the speed of the network is just way too fast for, like, it's a massive engineering effort to get to the speed of the network. And in that case, we often do have to drop back to, more batch analysis. So when we're talking about doing these engagements, like, yes, live is always great and you can get that, but either due to the architectural challenges there, or just safety and security, sometimes you do, that's where having batch is really nice. Last use
Yeah,
case, tactical deployments. So to Chris's point earlier, military law enforcement intel use of this, supporting, counterintelligence, supporting wire or cyber warfare, supporting other field operations. There's certainly around sensitivities when you get into the law enforcement space, in doing all that. And so, the ability to use a solution through this that doesn't compromise, whatever part of the operation you're concerned about. There's a whole lot of uses um, that we can get into there. But Chris, what are your thoughts? This one I know is a
yeah,
little harder to talk on this one.
yeah,
This
yeah.
one also gets a little outside of industrial, but
Right.
it is a good
Yeah.
space.
No, I think it's just interesting that where actually the use case came from. And so where we're moving more into OT and um, you know, critical infrastructure. There's a lot of great use cases, but fundamentally this is where, right, the flyaway kits were really kind of born out of. And other things that you mentioned, if there's a lot of traffic that you have to uh, look at, there may be certain data that you're looking for. So one of the things we've done over the years is we actually have a tap that has built-in filtering into it. So we have the ability to filter out traffic. um, so there's certain traffic you want to see, source destination, you can actually apply that filtering on the tap prior to sending uh, to capturing that data. So that can give you a little larger window of packet capture if you need it. And that's really where the packet brokers come into play, right? So we talked a lot about the wire taps to help get the data from the wire. But if you're going and tapping multiple links, we can also we have small footprint packet brokers as well that allow you to bring traffic in from multiple tabs or spam ports and be able to aggregate, filter, and media type and speed changes as well. So you may be looking at traffic from uh, at least in some of the military applications, some higher speed, maybe 10 gig, you want to filter down to 1 gig. So there's definitely some different applications. And with OT, someone mentioned, obviously a lot of it can be very low bandwidth. So uh, that's where aggregation can be very useful, where you may want to bring in traffic from multiple points as well. But yeah, the military use cases have definitely been something that really got the flyaway kit industry going. But again, we're finding a lot of use cases in OT and IT applications as well.
And the last thing I'll say there is a lot of the cybercom and other military uses kind of overlap threat hunting and other interesting areas. So the government, through cybercom and through a lot of other areas, are doing a lot of work that's pushing that side of the industry forward and starting to kind of come to the commercial side. So cool. So we talked about this earlier, but we do have the solution we showed earlier that has both Garland Technology and Insane Cyber in the package. We'd love to chat more about it if you're interested, but I will now turn us into questions. Sam.
have a couple here. So this kind of got touched on in the chat to the panelists, and they were kind of talking about this at the first bit. But what are some ways that you can avoid some of those? I know that you guys were addressing, Dan, I think you were touching on this, that there is like an interruption to the network there when you're plugging in a tap. So what are some kind of best practices as you're doing that to kind of avoid that or work around that so that it doesn't become an issue and you don't lose any integrity with the data, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, a wiretap, if you are going to use one, you have to insert it between two devices. So you are going to have to, you know, have an extra cable with you and disconnect the one. And so essentially you're going to go, you know, router to tap, tap to switch as an example. So that piece, you have to be prepared to do that and ensure that that's not going to be an issue, or you're doing it at the appropriate time. You know, otherwise, if you have the ability to do span or mirror ports, you know, we do have a simple hardware data diode solution as well that you could, you know, plug a span port into the data diode and then have the data diode copy it over. So at least you're isolating the traffic. So, you know, if you're going out there and someone says, hey, you plugged in my span port and shut my network down, which, you know, could be an issue if it's a very, you know, older switch or oversubscribed switch. But that there are some ways that you could utilize basic data diode, or use the tap, as Dan said. You can also use a tap as a data diode as well. You could plug into the one of the ports and get a copy out, just so you ensure you're not going in reverse direction.
Okay.
The other critical thing is always rely on if it's in an industrial or critical site, or really any site, always rely on the network engineers there and the OT network engineers, because they're going to know the network better than any outside person. And you don't want to be overconfident in that space. And on certain sites, you do actually have to go up to whatever vendors are on that network, right? So a word of warning to everyone listening is make sure to actually work with engineering on the site if you're going there, because every site's different. And by OT vertical, like the process and how you do it and sensitivities are significantly different across verticals and teams and scale.
Are there any regulatory requirements that focus around flyaway kits or taps specifically?
So it gets fun on this. So we have ones that like us and that have moved forward on us on things like NERC CIP, things that have incident response times that are tied to NERC CIP fines or other fines. So NERC CIP, for those not familiar, is the regulation on energy generation and other parts of that. And IR does fall into one of the SIP kind of standards. And so 100% there, like as you're defining out your SIP or as you're defining out whatever the standard is for, you know, the specific industry you're in, you know, the playbook, the procedures, your IR plan, all of that becomes important. And then also, right, making sure you don't bust any deadlines that are going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, we're also seeing, you know, regulations, you know, in terms of depending on the size of utilities for, you know, having that isolation. So, you know, we see a lot of substations where we're implementing our hardware data diodes as well to, you know, have that separation between the network and not allowing, you know, traffic in the reverse direction to the network.
Okay. So there's a question about the use case of mapping a local OT network and being able to define the assets of local networks. Is there something baked in that can handle that active or passively? And learning the assets that are plugged in, even if they're patch levels and OS levels, firmware or of the PLC, et cetera.
Absolutely. So both are possible, active and passive. It's popular, or it's possible to do it both from host and network data on the OT market. There are companies that are doing it entirely passive, and they have some options to also go active on the host side. They're actually using things like WMI and other connections to log on and grab whatever host data they're generating out of. On the network side, it also is possible. if you're doing it passively, location matters, right? And the protocol matters. So some protocols send like, hey, this is my make, model, and other information on there. Other protocols send like, hey, this is my operational status. This is other information in there. There are even some protocols where there's proprietary function codes that you can request the host logs off of the endpoint. And so if you're purely passive, location 100% matters because generally you want to sit between like the engineering workstation and the PLC or the HMI and PLC where some of those comms natively happen or sit around passive network monitoring or inventory solution if it's doing it. We aim to pick up both. And so if we're sitting around someone that's sending the beacon packets out from whatever protocol it is, we'll try to pick up that way. And then again, if people are comfortable, we do have the option to send it. That's less popular, obviously, to the sensitivity side. So to answer that, 100% depends on the quality of data and location you get. There are people that are doing it both active and passive there. We're kind of building up, particularly on the network side now, with a little bit of host for doing that.
And then Chris, there's a
Yep.
clarification about what you mentioned about the diodes and undirectional gateway when you're installing a tap. Can you dive into that a little bit
Sure.
further?
Yeah, so we do have quite a few of our network taps are unidirectional, which is a data diode design. So if we were to, as an example, you take a, say, router switch, place a tap in between it. The monitoring ports that come off the wire tap, they have no way of going in the reverse direction. So in that case, you do not need to then place another data diode on the monitoring ports of the tap. So that's incorporated in the tap. So that does give the ability to do passive monitoring and accomplishing getting the data in a unidirectional manner.
This one to you. We talked about it a little bit with the incident response side of things, but is there a benefit to having, I feel like when people think flyaway kits, and I think kind of the early invention of flyaway kits was around, them being a reactive tool, but is there a benefit to just kind of having one on site that you can go and plug in the event that something happens? What's the kind of use case around that?
We do, and it depends again on if you see them proactive or you see them reactive. If you see them a mix of both, we have people that are like, hey, let me get 4 or 6 and I'll have half be kind of proactively out in blind spots and I'll save the other half to be, reactive, break glass, send it out so I don't have to go out to the site and get it. And so we kind of see the demand on both being there.
Yeah, is there a value to having that? Like if even if you have like a contract or a retainer with like a managed service provider, what's the value
Right.
of having that on hand as well as the retainer?
So it's a flexibility going back to like the NERC SIP side. So like for our software, we actually can give it in a full cloud kind of SaaS offering. We can give it as an OVF. So some of our asset owners have virtualized all of their generation or refineries or whatever they are. And so for them, like we actually can give them a VM to roll out. So there's no hardware involved. It's just roll VM out and go. And then there's the hardware option where it gets interesting for SIP is we've worked with people that have multiple NERC SIP, environments. The tool sets are different between the different environments they're responding in. And so having a tool that's ready for either the regulated environment you're in that day or, to be ready to go out can be key, right? And that's also why we went to that flexibility side. Because the worst thing to be having would be, figuring it out while the building's on fire, right?
Sure. And one last question. I know we've only got a couple minutes left here, but what are the kind of key factors that you could be considering? I know Chris, on the Garland side, there's a lot of different taps that you can choose from. Dan, on the Insane Cyber side, there's some configurations that we can have. What are those key factors to finding the right solution for what each unique OT environment is going to need?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always available, number one, right, to help with assisting any design work. But there's quite a few different options when it comes to the tapping, and like I said, a lot of it's just understanding the physical layout. So I always like to say, when you're designing, tap monitoring, passive infrastructure, you think about structured cabling, right? What's the media type? What's the speed? Understanding that and the bandwidth, and but for us, we're always willing to assist as well if you're trying to get involved in a project.
Awesome. Great. Dan, anything from you? Oh, I think you're
Yep.
muted.
Will you repeat on that one last time?
Yeah, sorry. Is there anything to consider, as you're kind of customizing or configuring a flyaway kit?
Yeah, so it would also be, so there is some good IT threat hunting and other solutions out there. And on the OT side, to the point of like, what can you do out of protocols? What can you do out of host data? That's where having an OT company is key, because that's also how commercial solutions can quickly vary from some of the open source tools. We do have a team of reverse engineers that are going through industrial protocols. Openly, there's not as much there. So fit to the solution and then fit to the sensitivities is key.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today, and thank you everybody for attending. We are grateful for Chris from Garland Technology for attending and speaking with us today. And join us next month for our OT office hours. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dan and Chris, for the time, and we'll see you next month.
Yep. Have
Thanks
a
all.
great week. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.